Dinosaurs are famous for being big, scary, and extinct. But have you ever wondered what they sounded like? We know that birds tweet and dogs bark, but what did a T-Rex roar? Well, scientists think they've got the answer. They recreated the sounds of a Tyrannosaurus Rex and other dinosaurs using advanced technology. And it's not what you might expect. Let's dig into the sounds of the Jurassic. Hi, I'm here with Minute Earth. Okay, so we don't have recordings of dinosaurs, so scientists have to get creative when figuring out what they sounded like. One way is to look at their close relatives, like birds, and try to piece together their evolutionary history through the birds that are alive today. For example, a 2020 study published in the journal Acta Paleontologica Polonica used this approach to figure out what the velociraptor sounded like. The researchers found that the closest living relatives of the velociraptor were jungle fowl, the birds that roosters are related to. So they recorded jungle fowl and then manipulated the sounds to make them more or less like what we think a velociraptor might have sounded like. Voila, a robotic velociraptor. But the problem with using this indirect approach is that there's a lot of room for interpretation. Like, oh, I think it sounded kind of like this. So scientists are also working on more direct approaches, like recreating the sounds based on the structure of dinosaurs' vocal tracts and their skulls. To do this, researchers use advanced imaging techniques to create detailed 3D models of dinosaur skulls. Then, they can digitally manipulate these models to see how sound might have traveled through the dinosaurs' heads and how that might have shaped their calls. This approach has been used to figure out what a relative of Ankylosaurus sounded like. The scientists behind the study, published in 2023 in the journal Communications Biology, think that this relative of Ankylosaurus had a voice box that was tucked under its shell, which would have made it pretty hard for sound to resonate and amplify. So they created a model to test this hypothesis. Their results suggested that this dinosaur likely had to open its mouth really wide to produce sounds, kind of like a duck. So they recorded the calls of various ducks and then manipulated those sounds to match the structure of this dinosaur. Voila, a robotic Ankylosaurus. And if you're curious about what Ankylosaurus sounded like, well, here you go. But another team of scientists used a different approach to figure out what Ankylosaurus might have sounded like. These researchers didn't use computer models or birds. Instead, they looked at the ear bones of Ankylosaurus and compared them to the ear bones of other animals to figure out how sensitive they were to different sounds. Their results suggested that Ankylosaurus had excellent hearing across a wide range of frequencies, which means they could hear high-pitched sounds like birds tweeting and low-pitched sounds like a dog barking. And importantly, they could hear the sounds produced by their relatives, the crocodilians, which include crocodiles and alligators. So based on this evidence, the researchers think that Ankylosaurus probably made crocodilian-like sounds. And when they digitally manipulated alligator and crocodile sounds to match the structure of Ankylosaurus' skull, they got this. So it seems like Ankylosaurus made gurgly sounds like a crocodile. But what about the mighty T-Rex? A 2022 study, published in the journal Royal Society Open Science, used a combination of approaches to answer just that question. First, the researchers examined the structure of a T-Rex skull and compared it to the skulls of living animals to figure out how sound might have bounced around inside a T-Rex's head. Then they looked at the structure of the T-Rex's jaw and its teeth to figure out how it might have manipulated those sounds. Finally, they looked at the fossilized tail feathers of a T-Rex and compared them to the tail feathers of modern birds to figure out what role the tail might have played in amplifying the T-Rex's sounds. Put all of this together, and you get a T-Rex that sounds like this. Now that might sound kind of funny, but remember that the T-Rex lived in an entirely different world than us, so we can't really imagine what its calls might have sounded like. It's possible that T-Rex sounds are so fundamentally alien to us that we just can't wrap our heads around them. So maybe the T-Rex sounded like this, or maybe it sounded like this, or maybe something else entirely. In fact, we probably won't know what the T-Rex sounded like until we find a fossil with preserved soft tissue, which is unlikely, but not impossible. In the meantime, scientists will continue to use fossils and technology to try to piece together the sounds of the Jurassic. And who knows what other weird and wonderful sounds they'll unearth. Now you know what a T-Rex might have sounded like.